Okay. Are we are we live?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So hello everyone. Welcome to another event here at the Greenlit Fest. Nature in Verse, Finding Poetry in the Natural World. My name is Megha and I'm co-founder at the Greenlit Fest. We're delighted to have you with us today. Words, thoughts inspire words, and words inspire more thoughts, which eventually lead to action. But what happens when those words are poetry? Now, GLF has had a very long tradition of, I mean, not a very long, we're not a very long festival, but there has been a long tradition of trying to see how literature fits into the whole conservation, the whole idea of conservation. And that's really been what we've been aspiring to from the very beginning of launching this festival. So after uh, several events, we finally decided to probe into poetry as a means to exploring themes of nature and of conservation. And to take this conversation forward, I am absolutely delighted to have with us today Vinita. Vinita is an award winning children's author and she's also a prolific poet. A lot of her poetry has appeared in the Alipur Post, and you'll get to hear some of her fantastic verses today. Also, we have Katie Bagley. Katie is somebody who loves all things nature. She has more than 20 books on the environment. And one of those books is an anthology called On the Wild Side. It is a widely acclaimed anthology of poetry, a lot of which is actually based on real life experiences that Katie's had. And finally, we have Dr. Brajesh Raj. Now, Brajesh does a number of different things, but one of those things is that he is internationally published and anthologized hygiene. And he is also an editor at Cafe Haiku, which is an online poets group, a blog. It runs a blog and it also brings out an anthology of haiku. So today he's going to also probably enlighten us all a little bit more about haiku. So without wasting too much time, I'd like to jump into this conversation. Actually, it's more than a conversation. It's about hearing the verses that have inspired all of the panelists today. Some which they've written on their own, and some which probably have inspired them, but don't come from their own pen. So, Vinita, why don't we start with you? And if you could take us through something you have written first, and then maybe something which has inspired you.
I'm going to start with what I've written first. I'm a real newbie in the space of poetry. I think, especially sitting with a panel of people like the panel we have right now, who've been in the space of poetry for so long. I think for me, poetry has been a space of great power, and using the metaphoricity of nature and environment is something that I do not only in my stories but also in my poetry. So I want to read one of them, using nature to say and explore so much more through it. This one is titled "Beauty in the Land of Death." I usually write free verse. I have been toying with a little bit of haiku and senryu, and and it's amazing what these two formats have. In a especially when I'm in a space of telling stories, to collect so little words to say so much more is amazing. So it's amazing to see the poetry lined up today, that you guys have put together and the participants have. So I'm going to, before any more delays, I'm going to read my poetry very slowly. Today, I pick my way through fallen trees, relieved that even though the jasmines are in full bloom, I can navigate through the worry of debris in front of me. It's so hard to step out of my house and not take pictures of trees with neon green new leaves and flowers that are burning pink. Did you see the pillowy clouds stacked up on clear blue skies? The poor are still around, but I have learned in just 1 year to reconcile with their hunger, to turn blind to the violence of poverty, and stay with the little bits of beauty. but I would choose to see and immerse in the indignant floods of tyranny. I am in the land that used to hiding its scars in layers. Dig a little, and it will reveal roots of hunger, want, skeletons of broken aspiration. Did you know dreaming is the most prevalent occupation in the city? You must know that. You must know we step on the rubble of hope every day. That knowledge what knowledge can I gain from swapping death numbers? Is your self-righteousness indignation more authentic or is mine? Are we on the right side of history? Do they love the country less? Whose vision, whose death, whose sacrifice, whose yet? I'll stop here.
Oh,
Beautiful.
that was really beautiful. I'm sorry. I'm somebody, when I hear poetry, I just respond to it so emotionally. But
That was beautiful. Thank you for that.
maybe a little bit about this poem, Vinita, because you use nature. I mean, obviously you use nature, but there's also a very metaphoric sort of play on some of the themes. A walk on rubble and roots that
Yeah.
spell out. So if you could probably just uh,
I think nature has so many layers in it. Just the name of a flower means a season, and that we know that when we write haiku. Just saying winter would mean has so many layers to it, just like summer has, and just like the rains have. So
hmm,
I've always plowed through nature to say more than what I want to say because I think poetry is like art. You see, you give it your version, and there are so many threads that the recipient or the listener or the reader also gets to pull out and connect with, and you
yeah.
leave it open. And because you use in the environment, you they connect with what it means to them in that season or that flower or that you know the root or anything, any part of that. So I use nature very, very. I think I use it all the time. Even in my stories for children, I use the metaphoricity of the natural world when I write.
Is it a form of it's is it almost like comfort? Is it a source of comfort sometimes to because there's a what some people say is there's a steadiness to nature. So sometimes when your life is in turmoil, maybe that steadiness calms you and is a source of comfort.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. It is a source of comfort.
Okay.
It's a source of calming anger, resentment, all the things that we feel, all the upheaval. Nature has all of that in so many ways showing up for you. Yeah, you're right. It is the source of comfort.
All right. So I think without much ado, Katie will come to you and hear something from you. Uh, uh, am I audible, Katie?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. So you want me to start? Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay. Basically, I'm a children's writer. So whatever poetry I've written is actually for children. And I read out a poem, yes, as you said, from my book On the Wild Side. Uh, this poem is called A Trunk Tale. Actually, this poem was recited for one of the Kalagoda festivals, and it was recited to Bharatnatyam dance movements.
Oh,
So
nice.
Oh,
you can bring out so much art in poetry. I'm just trying to
Yes.
bring that out. Right. So this is about just a little about what the poem is about. It's elephants, herds of elephants. They love to forage in the forest, and they're voracious eaters because they have to match with the size, the amount they eat. So, in a short while, the forest is deprived of all its foliage because the elephants have eaten, and many of the younger trees are stamped over. So, the forest needs time to revive. So, the elephants have this instinct and they know it, and the matriarch leads the entire herd to another forest. But while they're doing so, they're passing through what is known as a green corridor, which also is wild, which also has trees. But how we people consider a green corridor, oh, this is nothing, we can just graze it, we can use it for our highways and railways. And as a result, there are quite a few fatalities while the elephants cross through this, between from one forest to another, because the green corridor has been destroyed. So anyway, this is called a trunk tale. The herd of elephants gathered together. It was time to leave their home and move on to another healthy forest way beyond, as the trees here were laid bare of leaves, having served the pachyderms their need. For they have an enormous appetite, but the trees too need So it was time for them to move on to another healthy forest beyond. The herd was led by the wise matriarch, aunts, mothers, and the little calves. Trustingly, they all followed her. She headed for the green corridor that would lead them to a new home, for the old trees had to be left alone. They walked all of 4 days and nights, looking forward to eat with their might. Back and forth along this passage, year after year they had traversed. But alas, the matriarch got into a quandary. In place of the corridor was now a quarry. So they turned around the whole lot, and the matriarch decided on the spot they would look for a forest elsewhere. She raised her trunk and sniffed the air. The smell of sweet sugar cane. What a delight! They rushed to the strange, unknown sight. Miles and miles of the sweet crop. They could hardly wait upon it to gorge. On a wild, carefree rampage they went, helping themselves to their heart's content. Bang, bang. Their merry feasting was cut short. The air crackled with the sound of gunshots. Just look at those elephant thieves. How dare they enter my fields? The message was loud and clear. They were simply not wanted here. But the elephants were greatly confused. They didn't know where to go, what to do. So they walked on, seeking another place from where they wouldn't be driven away, a place not taken over by mighty man, a place where they could roam free. It had to be another forest grand. So that is what it is.
Yeah, it's remarkable, right? How different it is because I mean, I just obviously this looks like something that is based on very it's based on observation and knowing about how the environment functions and how elephants walk through corridors. Is it natural for you to sort of take natural truths and bring them into poetry? I mean, is it
Yes,
or do
uh, I find a lot of joy in doing that, first of all. And you feel I mean, of course, this poem is bringing out the hard truth, but it's a form of celebration of nature. The best way you could celebrate nature, the best way you could spread the word about how fascinating nature can be and how it is so necessary to conserve and protect. This can be done through playing around with words, through poetry, because it brings that kind of charm to it, the whole effect. And I
yes.
think it is,
Yeah,
it's
because very often very often you tend to read about these in non-fiction. I know that because I myself tend to write a lot of non-fiction. Poetry doesn't come very naturally to me. So I'm always in wonder of people who can, actually bring such hard truths in lyrical fashion. So I'm glad that you shared that, Katie. We're going to come back for another round from our poets, but I'm going to go to Brijesh now, who has his haiku to share. And I'd also urge the other two, I think it'll be lovely if you have any observations on each other's work or anything. It'll be really nice to.
Yeah,
Uh,
so I would like to thanks Megha. I would like to start with um, something that Vinita said when she was talking about how the listener or the reader, experiences things differently or perhaps layers. And that's something that we use all the time in haiku or senryu writing as well. She would know this, where the listener or the reader joins that circle, it completes the circle, and it becomes a different layer as per their lived experiences. And that is their truth. So, it's a desirable thing sometimes in one style of haikai writing where you leave it a little open ended. But there's another style where it's like a snapshot, like a photograph. So it's different sensibilities, different strokes for different folks. So I'll come to a short one that is dear to my heart. This was written some years ago. It's dear to me also because it was accepted by a journal which I really, really am fond of, called the World Haiku Review. And the editor is a Japanese. He was teaching. He was a teacher in Oxford, but he's Japanese, and he paints and he writes, and he's a hygiene of note. And so I feel very honored that he felt this poem was, worthy of being selected. No place to go. The urban dreams of banyan roots. No place to go. The urban dreams of banyan roots.
Right.
So,
So, do you want to tell us a little bit about the
so
creation?
I always wondered because living in Mumbai, it's a concrete, to quote a cliche, it's a concrete jungle, and I always wonder where it's going. The banyan is ubiquitous; it's all over the place. There are aerial routes that are coming down, and I've always wondered where they're going to go because if you see old trees, so it's in that sense very literal. So if you see old trees, they need to connect with Mother Earth. They need to grow. They need to expand, and here it's just concrete. So there is. I felt really sad. This thought incubated in my head for I think about a year actually before I wrote this poem, and there were many drafts and things like that. But obviously, I was not actively trying to write it all that time, but it just was there, and that's where it came from. So
Mm,
I felt it kind of fitted with the theme of conservation, and it's particularly dear to me this one.
that's good. Do you want to? Do you have another haiku to share?
Sure. So a
I need to
different.
ask you, when do you use the word haiku and when do you use the word haikai? I'm sorry, forgive my lack
Oh,
of
so
knowledge.
I'm sorry, no problem. So haikai is the overall. It's like the entire set of prose poetry. All whether it's senryu, haiku, haibun, tanka. All of these forms are called haikai forms. Haiku is generally nature centric. Senryu is generally more human centric. So these are like subsets of the haikai forms,
Sure,
right?
sure.
Okay. So may I just read another one? Something a little bit more happy, perhaps.
Yes,
It's
actually, I think so.
okay. So monsoon sky, the charcoal strokes of a kite's wings. Monsoon sky, the charcoal strokes of a kite's wings. So again, a very Mumbai scene. You have the paria kites with their folk tales and wings and their things of beauty. I at least just never tire of watching them. And sometimes I've been fortunate, you go to a tower, you go to a high rise, and you see them at eye level. Otherwise, there's something really, really inaccessible and high up. So this is, it tells me about, from you're kind of zoning in and zooming out rather, to what the bird is doing with the backdrop of. I think in Mumbai, the monsoon skies are the most beautiful.
Yes.
So you get the most amazing sunrises and sunsets and evening skies, and so therefore for me this is very, very evocative.
It just struck me that all three of you are from Bombay. I mean, from Mumbai.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. So, yeah, I mean, this is a happy coincidence. Mm. And also probably, something which may bring an element of congruence in your writings because
Yeah.
we tend to get inspired by what we see around us, right? When
Absolutely.
we write about nature. So I think on that thought, Vinita, back to you for something more. Uh,
I
anything?
I have another one which is a Sendrio, and I'll read it. It says, "Blizzards, we find ourselves lost in life. Blizzards, we find ourselves lost in life.
Beautiful.
Oh,
And so true.
yes. Maybe a little bit about how this was written, or is it?
I was learning how to, rein in words, and I thought, and haiku may just seem like three lines, but it's so much of thought that has to go into creating and pulling in and just saying just one word that explodes in your head into so many multiple meanings. And the beauty of that was something I was exploring. And so it's just, this is wordsmithing for me.
Hmm.
But it's interesting because there is technique in it, and there's also so much of thought. And sometimes poetry just comes to you not because you're sitting to write one, it just because it just comes to you, and it just fits in like a jigsaw puzzle, and it just works so perfectly. There's another one that I've written: raindrops on weathered heart, fall is a season. And again, I'm just playing with a season, with water, with the weariness, and the
Do you want
fact
to
that
recite that?
change
Sorry, do you want
sometimes
to
is the
recite
only
that one more time? Do you want to recite that one more time? Sorry.
Yes, please. Yeah. Could you
yeah,
just
sorry.
recite that again?
Raindrops on weathered heart, fall is a season.
Ah, okay. Sometimes it's easy to, yeah, miss it when you hear it just once.
Yeah, it's too short,
Raindrops
so
on
you have
weathered heart. Yeah, raindrops on weathered heart, fall is a season. And it's about, so what does water mean to you? What does rain mean to you? That season. And the fact that seasons are cyclical and change is something that is always there. And yet, the routine of the again. So it's about weariness, about routine, it's about seasons, and it's about consistency in the change
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
that I want to put together. Yeah.
But beautiful, really. Katie, do you?
Do you want me to read another haiku or another poem? Anything?
Up to you. Yeah. I think if either,
Okay.
again, I just repeat myself. If either of any of you have anything that you would want to ask the other, please, I'm very happy to
Sure.
have as a
Um,
conversation.
okay.
Yeah.
Can I have a question? Can I ask something? This was there in my mind. We are so fascinated by nature. Supposing, consider yourself, you're on the beach. This is actually what I had seen in the Andaman Islands. And suddenly, out of some driftwood, you see scores of hermit crabs just rolling out. This is
Hmm.
what I had seen. And hermit crabs, nature for some reason hasn't given them a protection for the lower halves of their bodies. So they have to look around for abandoned shells to cover that unprotected lower half. And all these hermit crabs got themselves into an ordered queue from the largest to the smallest in size. And then they actually walked into the shell one size larger of the hermit crab in front of them. So it was so much of saving of energy for searching for all of them for a abandoned shell. It was only the largest hermit crab that had to look out for a shell. And this put this question into my mind. When you're in the midst of nature, you see something which really, fills you with so much awe. And which part of your brain gets more stimulated by this? Is it the left half, which is analytical, which has more mathematics in it, which was, trying to calculate why are they doing it? Or is it the right side of your brain, which is more of the arts and more of emotions, and you want to write a poem on it, So what would you consider this? I mean, like, what would you think about if you came across such a situation?
So, Vinita, would you like to take that?
Would you like to
That
come in, Vinita, or shall I?
to take that question.
It's a little noisy here. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I think, I really think that we use both sides of our brain when we're creating. I really, really feel that. And especially with haiku, I think it is also logic. It is also a math. It's a lot of these things. So if you ask me an offhand question, I will say no. It will be, it's the creative side of the brain. But I think both sides of the brain are used in all creative processes. That's what I believe now. Because I'm into the process now, I feel like there's no way it can only seem like one part of the brain is working. The creative, the part that requires freedom, the part that enjoys music, and not the logical analytical part. I think both parts work when you're creating something that is so open to transformation for you internally and for the other person.
So I'd like to expand on that a little bit from my own personal experience. I mean, it's probably different or similar for everybody, for different people. Um, I would always like to still one part of the mind and just witness, just try and stay in that moment. And I find that when I'm not trying to think, I'm just watching, observing, and trying to achieve a little bit of stillness, that I that automatically, you get a certain a germ of an idea of a haiku, what might become a haiku or a senryu or something. And then, of course, once you get that down, then you would work and rework, and that's the part which looks at the rules, looks at the craft, looks at everything else. So yes, you would use both sides, but initially I would kind of try and knock off that thinking, because I think we tend to do that a bit too much anyway. At least I tend to. So I kind of try to still that, and that's again part of a haiku. There are certain haiku poems which are meditative, use Zen principles, not necessarily throughout all of them, but some. And this is very much part of that ethos, where you're just a witness. It's not very different from our own ethos as we know it,
That's
from our own
good.
culture.
But on that note, I know Brijesh, you had a collection. Brijesh had a collection of, would it be haiku? Would I call
Haiku.
them
Yes,
haiku?
haiku. Yes,
From the masters, which were composed, these are, I think some of them he says really go way back.
yes.
So I think Brajesh, let's hear a few.
Yeah.
Um,
So I would love to read from, because they are the people who really initiated the entire process. So I'm just going to read a few. We'll start with the all-time great Matsuo Basho. A field of cotton, en dash, as if the moon had flowered. A field of cotton, as if the moon had flowered. So again, these were wandering monks. They followed Buddhism, and they were the kind of people who would write for a living. They believed in living with less and observing and writing about nature. So, which is why it's for me, it's almost like a reference point. Obviously, I don't think I'm ever going to reach anything near this, but it's just so beautiful. Another master, uh, Yosa Busan, afternoon shower, holding onto a blade of grass, a village sparrow. Afternoon shower, holding on to a blade of grass, a village sparrow. So the attention to the small things, the beautiful things that we tend to kind of overlook, the moment, uh, it's so beautiful. You just have to you just wait, like as if you've been struck by something. Um, One more by Onitsura, Oijima Onitsura. Silent the garden where the camellia tree opens its whiteness. Silent the garden where the camellia tree opens its whiteness. So it's so strikingly visual, it's so beautiful.
yes, it's very. I think what I find in the various bits of poetry that we've heard is how they sort of, like when we went with Vinita's first, it sort of made me think of life, and I sort of, there was a little bit of pain and there was a little bit of hope, and it sort of evoked these very human emotions. And I suppose nature does that. But the thing is, in that poem, the thing that remains with me is, the feeling that it made me, like the feeling that it evoked inside me. But and then Katie's was altogether different. It reminded me of all the books that I've read about elephants and the way elephants live their life, and all the tragic truths of elephant conservation in the country. And then, of course, you have haiku, which you read, and Brijesh, your own, as well as the ones from the masters that you just, which are very, very visual. They are very, listening to them. I think the first sort of sense that one gets is of imagining a painting. I sort of, I can imagine them go with a painting. And I'm just wondering whether actually haiku were traditionally written to go with painted with paintings.
That was probably the original haiga, where you have a painting matched with a coup. But it wasn't always visual. You also had different senses. So I'll read one more. Um,
Mm.
the stream in the valley, stones to sing songs under the cherry blossom. The stream in the valley, stones to sing songs under the cherry blossom. Again, Onitsura. So you can have visual, you can have auditory, you can have both, like a synesthesia. Sky's the
Yeah,
limit.
it's almost like a picture, but that's captured in words.
Yes.
Like in my mind, it's automatically I'm imagining a stream flowing under a cherry blossom with those stones in it, or a bird hanging onto a blade of grass when you
Yeah,
have a summer shower.
And the
So
natural instinct would be to say that the water, the river is singing. But to
yes,
visualize the
yeah,
stones as
yeah,
alive,
right,
that's a
exactly.
different sensibility.
that's true. So, I mean, I think it's been very nice to just listen to poetry and the various inspiration behind the poetries, and indeed the various forms of poetic expression. I mean, I'm still not convinced about whether I am ever going to be able to write good poetry. I think mine is remarkably juvenile, but
Uh, I'll just come in briefly there. So one of the masters actually has said that in your entire lifetime of writing, if you can write two or three good haiku, then you've achieved what
More
you've
than,
been meant
yes,
to achieve.
absolutely. So
so,
you can go ahead and
so no
start.
worries. You just have to write.
so, on that note, shall we actually go to the shortlisted entry for
Yes, yes,
Yes,
shortlisted
of course,
entries for the
definitely.
bits of the
yes,
haiku that actually
absolutely.
came in as part of our
Yes,
Nature Haiku contest, our
sure.
first actually contest at GLF, and so to everybody watching, Brijesh, Vinita, and Katie were kind enough to look at the various haiku, and we
Pleasure.
had a little chat about them. But it was really heartening to see the kind of entries that came in. And I know it's often said as a way of saying, but I really mean it when I say that some of them were really beautiful, and almost like very hard. We had our limitations to pick three, but very hard to pick really between some of the creations that came in. They were just so beautiful. But the contest was very clear in that it was a nature haiku contest.
Right.
Unfortunately, some of the some of the things submissions that came in, we had to sort of unfortunately leave out because they were more in the genre of free verse rather than haiku. But Ganesh, on that, can we have the first shortlisted entry on stage? Oh, you've got Ustat. All right. So Ustat, okay, we'll start with, sorry, I'm very sorry about that. We'll start with Srinivas. Srinivas couldn't be here today. I think he's held up, but he sent in these beautiful bits. So I'm going to just read it. Himalayan hike, he bows to the hills at every turn. Himalayan hike, he bows to the hills at every turn. And the second one is Rain puddle. A paper boat flirts with the moon. Rain puddle. A paper boat flirts with the moon. So, yeah, I mean, Srinivas couldn't be here for us to have a quick chat with him about his submission, but I think we have quite a few of the shortlisted participants with us today. So, Ganesh, can we have Vandana? Yes, Vandana. Uh,
Hi,
Hi, Vandana.
hi, thank you so much for selecting my haiku. It's great to
Uh,
be here.
Thank you
Happy
for
to
sending it
have
in.
you.
Congratulations.
Thank
You
you.
want to
Thank you
read
so much.
yours since it's up on the screen?
Yes, sure, definitely. Just when I'm about to give up, summer's first rain. Just when I'm about to give up, summer's first rain. Wooden plane, will the tree now touch the sky? Wooden plane, will the tree now touch the sky?
Right. And Vandana, what was your sort of inspiration behind this this verse that you have, these haiku that you have sent in? Was there
Uh,
something?
yeah, the first one is basically, it's a metaphorical haiku about when we get so depressed or when we are experience like sometimes I get existential crisis or midlife crisis, and when we are in the throes of depression or throes of negativity, and then something suddenly comes up and cheers you up. So it feels like summer's first rain when all your depression, all your sorrows, everything washes off and you feel rejuvenated, refreshed. So that was basically the thought behind it. And the wooden plane, will the tree now touch the sky? It's about the dreams we have of soaring high. We build so many dreams around us. We try hard, but do all the dreams come true? We try our hard, but do all the dreams come true? So it's basically seeped in reality, the harsh reality of life.
Right. Oh, very nice, very nice. I think we can now have the next shortlisted entry, Ravi Kiran. Ravi, is Ravi with us?
Hi, good evening. I guess you guys can hear me?
Good, good
Yes,
evening.
yes, Ravi.
Yes,
Good
Okay,
to have you.
thank
So, do
you.
you
You
want
want me
to?
to read?
Yes,
yes,
please.
please.
Thank you. Where once a forest stood, concrete jungle. Where once a forest stood, concrete jungle. Ocean's dirge, a cormorant soaked in spilt crude. Ocean's dirge, a cormorant soaked in spilt crude.
Right. Do you want to say something about, because very conservation oriented haiku, but a little bit about your sort of source
Sure.
inspiration?
The first one, if you actually take up, I lived for about 22 years in Bangalore. I saw the city grow then. I'm now in Hyderabad for the last 4 years. But in both these cities, what I see is the suburbs. Actually, the localities have names like a village. In Bangalore, it used to be called this Hulli and that Hulli and so on. So, which means there were actually independent villages, which independent ecosystems, and then probably forests as well. But now you get to see this tech park there and that tech park there. So that is how the first one was inspired. The second one, I think, one of my favorite images, rather sad images, is about the crude oil getting spilt off mega tankers and how that kind of gets swept to this thing and how wildlife was affected. The image of one of these cormorants is still very vivid in my mind. But if you look at the first line, when you actually see that the crude oil has spilled and it has hit the shore, the waves don't make the same sound as splash. They're more like thwap because they're
Hmm.
heavy with crude. So it's
Yes.
actually, metaphorically, the ocean is like weeping and singing a melancholic song because of what has happened. So that's my take. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravi. Ganesh, I think Mona is not here, but can we have Mona's haiku up on screen, please? Yeah. So I'm going to read Mona's. Summer breeze, a fledgling abandons the nest. Summer breeze, a fledgling abandons the nest. And then summer breeze, between lines of wheat, a singing warbler. Summer breeze, between lines of wheat, a singing warbler. So I think Mona's, I mean, Brijesh would probably know this, but Mona's again is very sort of classic haiku in terms of evoking imagery, I think,
Yes,
in
I
the.
would have loved to have heard her inspiration.
Yes,
It's sad that she isn't here because, Summer Breeze, again, she's left it a little open ended. Is she talking about a fledgling? Is she talking about an empty nest? Is she talking about somebody, going towards freedom? I mean, could be anything. It's
it would
just,
have been nice
it's
to
just the
hear
hat.
from.
Yeah, it's just the hat that the listener or the reader wears. So yeah, beautiful.
Yeah,
And even the second is a very strong visual, and she's used a visual and touch of summer breeze perhaps, and the sound of a small little bird. It's so beautiful. Yeah.
true. Uh, then I think Teji is here with us. So can we have Teji's haiku and Teji as well in the studio? Yeah.
Yeah, hi,
Hi,
good evening.
Good evening.
Teji.
Uh,
Why don't we hear from you?
yeah, sure. The first one is Chatak, how dense these clouds and yet no rain. Chatak, how dense these clouds and yet no rain. Cuckoo's song, branches heavy with the scent of mangoes. Cuckoo's song, branches heavy with the scent of mangoes.
Beautiful. So
Very
can you
nice.
tell us a little bit about your haiku, Teji?
Um, and the first one is like I'm very much inclined towards using Hindi words in haiku. So Chatak denotes the monsoon and it's a harbinger of monsoon. So I've used that these days. Chatak must be looking at the clouds and feeling that there's a scarcity of rain or there's a drought. So this was the idea behind it. And second one is a very simple imagery. I'm very much drawn towards mango blossoms. So I've written Cuckoo's song, and I especially use the word heavy with the scent of mangoes because when the mango blossoms, the branches are heavy with it. So I didn't like to use I wanted to use the sense of smell in it. That's why I've used the scent of mangoes rather than giving a picture of hanging mangoes in it.
I see. No, no, it's very sort of very rich visual imagery. Um, and finally, we have Ustat. Um, Ustat, so that's your mom?
Yeah.
Yeah, she is.
Okay, that's nice. So you have two haiku
Two
composers,
hygiene, yeah, two hygiene
two
in the same
hygiene
household.
in the same. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
there's like an alliteration to it. Hygiene in the household.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ustad, why don't you read yours? I
Yeah.
think.
First light, crickets call the chorus to an end. First light, crickets call the chorus to an end.
And could you tell us a little bit about your haiku?
I mean, I don't write haiku a lot. I'm more of a sendu writer. So this was my attempt when I was first learning what haiku is, and being a student, I'm a night owl. I stay awake at very odd hours at night, and this is something I've experienced myself a lot because since we live near a park in like very green areas, the cricket sound is very continuous at night. So throughout the night it's something that I've experienced a lot, and I just tried to put across that moment. So that's how it was written.
Very evocative. I think Brijesh had some. Brijesh, there was another. We don't have that here with us, but I think the you had sent in three entries, and we particularly like this one. Um,
Yes.
But yes, that's
It
why we
was
have
beautiful.
this.
I'm glad we could hear from her because the
Yes,
backstory really deepens it. Yes, very
really
nice.
deepens this particular one. But thank you so much, Ustad.
Thank you so
Um,
much.
I think it might be nice to just quickly hear what Ustad says. Brijesh, when she says she's normally doesn't write haiku, you said you normally write
Send you.
senryu.
Yes.
So that's very different. That's a very different form of obviously composing or writing. So how is it different from? I mean, I'm sorry. This is for probably everybody here who is getting
Let's
familiar.
hear from Ustat. Yeah, tell us something about Send you, Ustat.
I mean, obviously, the way, the form of writing is a three-line piece, but you don't have a kigo, which is a natural reference in a scenario, and it's more oriented towards human connections. So, human feelings, emotions, or anything satirical, almost that you see happen in your day-to-day life. So that's what usually scenario is
Right.
associated.
So you tend to write more of that than more of this.
I do. Yeah.
Is it harder to write haiku?
I think it depends on your inclination. For some people, it's harder to write a senryu. For some, it's harder to write a haiku. So I don't think I can comment on which is harder. For me personally,
So,
it is harder to write a haiku, obviously. So
Interesting.
so in Japan, Nika, in general, a hygiene who writes senju will write senju, and a hygiene who writes haiku will write haiku.
Right.
Generally, you will not have the two. But here, I mean, we do tend to write, and pretty much all over the world, hygiene do write both forms. So I certainly hope Ustat will continue writing haiku as well.
I would.
I Before actually we announce the winners, maybe Brajesh, Katie, if you know, if there are any sort of online groups where people who write poetry which people who I mean, I know there's Cafe Haiku for haiku enthusiasts, but are there other platforms for people who write poetry which they can join online and maybe, um,
Yeah, sure. There are several within India. I mean, online now you have so many options. You have many groups. You have the Haiku Foundation, which is probably one of the largest. Um, so many options. Um, and Facebook has a lot of groups as well. So finding one will not be hard. But even in India, there is uh, Triveni, which is there, Cafe Haiku, which is there. There are several. There are several
right.
groups. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Now, I was just wondering if there are any specific examples. Katie, would you know of any? Probably,
No, I'm sorry, I don't know about these.
right?
Every once in a while, you'll also have opportunities to join a workshop.
Yes.
Yeah.
Obviously, it won't be all the time, but there will be specific workshops. I think Ustad has also been with Gautam, I believe, at one of these, and he writes. He's a hygiene I know who writes Senju. So there are workshops that are offered off and on. You just have to keep an eye out. But if you want more information, I can kind of put it together and send, and perhaps you
Yeah,
can post it later.
maybe
Sure.
yeah, that might be nice for, I think, anybody who's a poetry.
Yeah, there are various FB groups also. There's Shared Haiku, there's Haiku Foundation is big, like I said, and all of these guys have archives. World Haiku Review has archives with scholastic articles which have been archived. It's superb. There are books that have been written which are must reads. So Jane Reichold is a really well known author for hygiene. So there are a lot of resources out there. So not hard, but yeah, I can send you.
I think
Yeah, I
there's a
think.
poetry circle also.
Yes.
There's a
Okay.
group called the Poetry Circle. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
So maybe what we could do is we could probably create a short post on some of these, which
Sure.
enthusiasts could consider joining online, offline, whatever. I
Yes.
mean, an option. So with that, I
Absolutely.
think it's time to reveal our winners
Yeah.
for the Nature Haiku contest. As I said that I think there was at least one deliberation that I can very clearly say that went into finalizing the names of whoever won. but just very delighted with everything that's coming. So, Ganesh, can we have the first certificate? Okay, so um, Srinivas S was the first. Then, can we have the second one? I mean, there's actually not first, second, third, but yeah, Mona. These are the ones which got consistently high scores from all three of our jury, which is Katie, Vinita, and Rajesh. So there's Mona, and the third one. I mean, this is not the third; it's literally just our
Just
top three. Just
So we just, yeah, yeah.
delighted, and then mother daughter. But yeah, I think it was actually particularly close between Teji and Ustad. But I think Ustad, your hand at haiku really paid off. In the sense it's really beautifully done, and I hope you do continue to write more of I mean, apart from, you also continue to write haiku apart from the others, apart from the sendu that you do. So
Send you.
sendu, yeah, okay, I'm getting my pronunciation right. But all the winners will be sent a Google form, so you can choose the books that you'd like us to send, and we'll be sending a participation slash winning certificates to everyone who was part of this contest. We're really, really delighted that Katie, Vinita, and Rajesh could take out the time just to be with
Pleasure.
us. And to everyone who submitted, we were really, really glad to have all those number of entries. We did get, I think we had about 24 people participating, which was a fairly good number and a good number of haiku to actually look at, a good number of poetry, a good amount of poetry to look at. So, absolutely delighted. And to everyone who's watching, I think it's going to be available on YouTube, so you can tune in later. And whoever has been watching, thank you so much for tuning in and watching us on a Sunday early evening. I hope you have a brilliant Sunday, everyone. Thank you so much for
Thanks,
tuning
Megha.
in.
And
thank you
Megha, could
for
I just
inviting
recite?
us.
Thank you.
Yes,
And could I just recite one last piece by a master?
sure.
Yes,
Uh,
please.
so this is a favorite of mine, the master and his work, Kobayashi Isa. Don't worry, spiders. I keep house casually. Don't worry, spiders. I keep house casually.
How nice.
Thank you so much.
That is lovely.
That was really lovely and a nice note to end this with. But just,
Yes,
I think it's been
Yes,
a fabulous evening of just listening to a little bit of poetry and, moving on. I think poetry does allow us to pause in life and maybe use our minds and, I think
absolutely. Yes.
invigorating in that sense. So please do keep writing to everyone who participated in the contest. And if you have other green submissions or you want to reach out to us for anything else, please do that. And thank you so much for being a part of Nature in Verse, finding poetry in the natural world. We'll see you with another event shortly.
Thank you
All right.
so much, Megha. I think, and thank you, Greenlit Fest, for organizing
absolutely.
this event.
Thank you so
Really,
much.
I wish,
Thank you, Megha.
more and more such beautiful events.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Thank
Yeah.
you so
Katie.
much,
Been a pleasure.
Sujit.
Thank you,
It's a
everybody.
pleasure to have you all. All right.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
My pleasure. Bye. Bye.